Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Tom and David. We are live on the World Happiness Academy, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. So, welcome, everybody, to this webinar with bestseller authors David Shurna and Tom Lillig. I mean, it's from bestsellers to the World Happiness Fest webinars. This is, I have to say thank you.
Thank you, Luis. It's an honor to be with you today and talking to this wonderful group.
Well, why don't we frame a bit this conversation, because we are gonna be talking about your amazing best-selling book, What's Within You, and is the roadmap to living a life with no barriers. That by itself says a lot. Mm-hmm. But let's frame it a bit, the conversation. So why don't we introduce who you are? Because I think that two people who are able to come out with something so relevant have really something powerful inside. So I've been knowing you, David and Tom, for a while, a couple of months, and you are amazing people. Let me just say that David is the executive director and co-founder of No Barriers, amazing not-for-profit, focused on and actually teaching and coaching and showing and guiding people around how to live a life at the fullest. And Tom, you are the chairman of the board, but then you run an amazing agency where you actually get rid of barriers as you go through it. So, but why don't you tell us a bit more about who you really are? What's within you, Tom and David?
Well, that's a great question. And I thank you for that very generous opening and introduction. I think that what is also unique about Dave and me, and what compelled us to take on this project together, is that this is in so many ways a life's work for David and I. Dave and I have known each other since middle school, and in chapter 5, we chronicle some of those beginnings of like forming that friendship and forming that, as we call, rope team, that on-rope friendship that's so important. But what we wanted to do is, throughout our lives, I think we were both called to do something that allows us to unleash our potential, but more than that, help others unleash theirs, help others overcome their barriers, and help others find their purpose, because that has been a struggle as well as a grand quest within our own lives. And with the organization, the nonprofit No Barriers that you talked about before, we get to do that with people of all walks of life, people with disabilities, wounded veterans, corporate leaders. People of all walks of life have come to our organization and found what is the motto of our organization. They have found what's within them is stronger than what's in their way. And that's why, it made sense that, the only title that we could choose for the book really was What's Within You, because that is both the question and the answer that we have both searched for throughout our lives, and which we really enjoy helping others ask themselves and find answers to.
Yeah, and I would, just add, since Luis asked, like, who are we really? Just a little bit of background. We grew up in Chicago, in a first suburb west of Chicago, for any listeners from Chicago, Oak Park. So we grew up in Oak Park, met each other in 7th grade. We were only in school together for 7th and 8th grade, so middle school. And then we went our separate ways. Tom went to the schmancy private high school, and I went to the local public school, neither of which was tough, but it was, we formed this bond at a young age that has lasted through a lifetime. And when I went to start the No Barriers organization nearly 20 years ago with a team of folks, blind mountaineer Erik Weihenmayer, some of you folks may have heard of him, the first blind man to reach the 7 summits. We had this amazing team of folks, and I knew we needed some real business leadership as well as someone who believed that, life was a constant search for meaning and purpose. And Tom was the first person that I wanted on that team. So Tom's been with us on this amazing No Barriers journey where we've served tens of thousands of people over the past 17 years. He's been with us since the very beginning.
Wow. So this is about friendship and brotherhood. Is that part of what you talk about in the book? What is in the book actually, and who is this book for?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And Luis, when we think about like who is the book for, I think it's for people who are sort of at that point in their lives where they're facing some form of barrier and they know that they want to get through it, but they're not sure how. So it gives them both the inspiration and some how-to steps to really tackle those barriers in their lives. But it's also for those people that are struggling to sort of find a deeper meaning, right? Sometimes we refer to this as being stuck, right? People have different ways of putting language against that feeling. But I think that people who are perhaps in the middle of their careers, or people, even youth, we find that it comes out in our youth programs that people don't know exactly what their purpose is and don't know what direction to go in, but they know that there's something within them, it's for them. So one way of looking at it is part of the human condition is that we all face barriers. Another part of the human condition is that we're all seeking purpose. So it may sound trite, but the book truly is for everyone, because as humans, we all are struggling with those questions of how to find this meaning in our lives, and also how to overcome those very real barriers that are in front of us. And what this book tries to do, and what I have found that it's difficult to put all in one book, but what we tried to do is do exactly that in this book, is navigate that gap that exists between this very harsh world filled with barriers that we're all trying to navigate through, and that eternal purpose that guides us throughout the barriers. And this book sort of sets the tone for saying it's not one or the other, it needs to be both. And hopefully we have achieved that with the book. It's based on, as Dave mentioned, tens and thousands of people that have been through our programs, and all of the scientific research that we've done on those participants that have been through our program. And so we've got great confidence that the methodology does in fact work. And we've now put it in a book form to allow more people to have access to that.
So David, I think that we are living in a world and in a situation right now where probably there are a few barriers that come to mind, right? Social distancing in many ways, the way it's being described probably should have been physical distancing is one of them. Is this something that you talk about in the book? How does the book fits with the actual barriers that we are living right now?
Yeah, well, Luis, one thing we know from, this 20-year history of working with all these people from all walks of life is that, adversity doesn't care about race or class, creed, or gender. I think COVID highlights this. We're experiencing this incredible global trauma. And one of the reasons we wanted this book to come out now is because we've been working with people who have faced incredible trauma in their lives for the past 20 years. We've worked with veterans with disabilities. We work with caregivers who spend a big part of their life taking care of someone else who is suffering. We work with business leaders who are working on some of the biggest challenges and breakthrough objectives that the world has ever faced. And I think what this time highlights for us, it's such a prescient moment in history where we all feel connected by the adversity we're facing. And yet, I think, Luis, that I don't know what your life was like growing up, but I didn't ever take a class on how to tackle challenges when they come. I didn't ever take a class on what do you do when trauma hits you? How do you get through it? And I think this is one of the things that this book and the courses that support the book and the experiences that No Barriers provide can help us with. We believe that there is a formula that you should be taught at a young age and old age, whenever you need to learn it. Hopefully we can learn this all together across the globe that helps us through times like this. This formula that we are describing in this book is teased out of work with extraordinary folks who have faced incredible adversity in their lives and somehow have come out not only getting through it, which is maybe what many of us feel right now in COVID, like, how do we suffer through this? When is it going to be over? But how do you actually thrive as a result of your adversity? How does you use the kind of latent energy in that what might be perceived as like a very negative moment and use it to fuel some new emergence that actually leaves you more fulfilled than ever before? And so we have seen that happen year over year in extraordinary stories. And this book highlights the pathway for you to do it for yourself right now in this moment of shared trauma.
Yeah, so talking about pathways, and this is something that, I've been fortunate enough to go through the whole training. You have a leadership training. I read the book. I've been through your summit a couple of months ago. It was spectacular. And I love the elements, what you call the elements. And it's part of the roadmap that actually you have here. Can we go a bit deeper? Because I think that we have a lot of people thirsty to know if there is really a roadmap. And if there is a roadmap, where are the milestones? So can we go a bit deeper into actually what happens when you have a barrier? What do you do?
Yeah, well, I would love to do that. And Tom, maybe we can kind of tag team on this. I'll just start by saying there is a roadmap. It's chronicled in this book. You can take courses to go through it with us, but it's not an easy path. It's something that, when we wrote this book and we put the courses together, this is a book that we envision you read and gets tattered and you walk through over and over again, because just like I was saying at the beginning, we are never taught we don't take a course on how do you deal with adversity so that you can use it to fuel your life. This roadmap is something you're going to come back to over and over. You got to keep being reminded of it. And so the very first element, Tom, why don't you talk about sort of the anchor of the roadmap? There's 7 parts of the journey, and it all starts with vision. Tom, do you want to talk about vision?
Yeah, vision is what we call our first No Barriers life element. And it really is the foundational element, because in so many ways, your vision is about figuring out what is your GPS coordinate, or figuring out where you need to get to in order to truly reach that level of fulfillment. It's almost like asking yourself, what is your why? And then detailing a path. And so we have some exercises that we have that we ask people to do at the end of each chapter. And at the end of the very first chapter in Vision, we pose the question, are you living for your resume or your eulogy? And out of that contemplation, we try to get to people thinking about their lives as a roadmap. And with the vision being that guiding destination that should drive all decisions forthcoming. It's the toughest element. It's the meatiest element. It's the one that I think that I personally have come back to over and over and over again throughout my life. But ultimately, it's that thing that should drive us forward and propel us through each of the other elements and adversities that we face along the way. For this element, we chose none other than Erik Weihenmayer, the blind climber that summited, the 7 summits. He was the first person to summit Everest. And there's a pivotal moment in his story where, after he stands on the top of Everest, on his way down, his climbing guide says to him, "Don't let Everest be the greatest thing that you ever do." And so here he is. He's just achieved this thing that has taken months and months of preparation and planning. And his guide has challenged him further and said that there is a vision to your life beyond standing on this summit. Go out and find it. And ultimately, part of Erik's vision was co-creating No Barriers. And so I share that story to say that, even when we think about these big moments in our life, Dave and I have had them ourselves, running the marathon, doing the Ironman, getting to this level within the company or the organization. There really is something more. And what we have found is that that vision needs to be something that benefits beyond the self. That part of crafting your vision, what truly leads to fulfillment, is when it is something that lifts others.
And Luis, I'd say, vision has been written about since the beginning of time and how important it is, right? And we talk about this in the book with, going back to Aristotle. Any religion talks about vision. Nietzsche says that he who has a why to live for can endure any how. I just want to make it really clear to those who are participating how important vision is. We've worked with tens of thousands of people, and if you don't kind of take that time to figure out the vision you have for yourself and your life and how it's going to be more than just you, and actually put it down on a piece of paper, or a card like you're just showing, Tom, the card that both of us keep in our wallet, which is, a metal card that actually we have our vision statement for the next 5 years. We crafted this right before COVID of each of ours is individual. It sits in my wallet that I pull out here every morning. And I sit there and I think about, how am I living that vision? Because when adversity strikes, and so like you're thinking about COVID and, maybe you lost your job, maybe you're like us at No Barriers and you had to lay off a lot of people. If you're wrapped up in this moment of I've lost my job, what am I beyond my job? I had to let go of my people. My whole business is changing. What am I beyond that business? Well, you need to spend some time thinking about your vision beyond these individual objectives. Just like Tom said, that Erik had to think beyond, I'm the guy who climbed Everest. I'm on every billboard. I'm a best-selling author. I was on Oprah. At some point, all of that still leaves people like Erik and many of the people featured in this book feeling empty, right? You'd think from the outside looking in, they've reached the pinnacle. Well, people who reach that pinnacle, who are featured in this book, often still have that emptiness until they define a vision for themselves that is about more than the next summit, the next big thing that they can do. It has to be deeper than that. I know, Luis, you have that. You have an amazing corporate career, and yet you knew there was something more, and the Happiness Fest is a part of that something more. That something more is what we come back to in our deepest and darkest times, the times that are featured in the introduction to this book, which is around Auschwitz and Viktor Frankl. And that he found that people who in those deep, dark times had, that vision that was deeper, those are the people who get through.
I love it. And I think the breakthrough for me, reading and understanding what vision means, is really finding the light inside. I think that, and people normally get confused. It's like, no, I have to write my legacy, which is going to be what I'm going to be doing more than being in the world. So I think that the breakthrough reading is like, no, this is about being. What is the light inside you, and how you are going to maximize that light into whatever you're going to be doing. That's the way you're going to be making the connection. So this is beautiful. And for people who can find that light, actually now, with all this adversity around, probably they are going to be building something spectacular over the next weeks, months and years, right?
Yeah, and I'll go on to the next element, but I just want to say, like, when we work with people who are completely stripped bare of everything they thought that they were. You know, you're a veteran and you're a warrior and you're in the military and you believe that what you're doing is making this huge difference. And then you have this massive life-changing injury and everything's taken away from you. You're kicked out of the military because you can't perform anymore. You lose your friendships and your rope team that we talk about in the book. You've got to come back to that. Just like you were saying, COVID is stripping a lot of us bare. What's still there? And how do you find that light? Once you find that and define it, or even sometimes before, because for some people might say, well, I don't know what the hell that is. Like, where's my light? I can't find that. You got to get started. And so the very next step is what we call reach. It comes from a climbing metaphor, which if you're a rock climber, you're often reaching up for a hold that you cannot see, right? So you're making your way up a rock wall and you're reaching into the unknown to try and find that next grip. Reach is about stretching our comfort zone. It's about finding some next very specific thing that you can stretch and reach for that is tied to your vision. So this is, you know, lots of books are written about goal setting, all about how do you set good goals. Most of us are terrible at it. Once you have a vision that you're shooting for, the very first thing we ask you to do is, great, you've got a vision. Maybe you're not sure it's quite right. You're going to be tweaking it. You're not 100. Pick something aligned with that vision that is very concrete that you can shoot for. And we often put a parameter on it, like in the next 6 months, one thing you can do. So our story here in this book that I like to highlight is the story of Mandy Harvey, who is a jazz vocalist who was a finalist on America's Got Talent. And she happens to be deaf. And 500 million people watched her America's Got Talent performance. And it was incredible. It brought the world to tears, right? Well, for Mandy, her reach was not, I want to be an America's Got Talent star. She lost her hearing when she was age 17. She started to lose her hearing in college while she was studying music. And she wanted to be a musician. And all of a sudden, she starts to lose her hearing. She comes to find she has this pretty rare disorder that's going to cause her to lose all of her hearing. A couple of years later, she's lost it all, right? She's completely deaf. She thinks her entire music career is done. How can you be deaf and still be a musician and a singer, right? Devastating blow. How do you go about this? So it's not in that moment where she says, you know what? I want to be an America's Got Talent superstar singer. So this is an important thing to recognize, is that reach is that next step where you got to pick something that's going to stretch your comfort zone, but can't be too grand because it'll feel overwhelming, right? And it's got to be tied to your vision, right? And so what Mandy determined is, I want music to still be a critical part of my life. I believe I might be able to still inspire people with my music. But her first thing she did was to go sing at the local coffee shop, basically. It's a place in Fort Collins, Colorado. She's like, I'm not going to be America's Got Talent, but can I sing one song in front of 20 people still, you know? And it turned out she could. That was her first reach goal. She was scared shitless. She was scared out of her mind to go do it. It was stretching her out of her comfort zone. And so what we teach is that reach is this process of saying, what's that goal that's attainable but scares you, that's going to stretch you, that is tied to your vision? Set it down. A lot of folks, I've got my flags behind them, put it on this no barriers flag. Like, what is my reach goal? I'm going to put it there on that flag and I'm going to go after it. But that's the next step in the journey. How do you reach?
Wow.
And
Not easy. I mean, the first two steps are not easy at all, but they are super powerful. So there is a third step, right? So why don't we go through them and then we go backwards, and maybe we understand how do we really break barriers from, and maybe we can give some tips for people as well, because thinking about vision and reach by itself, I think it might take a lifetime to some people, right? So it's the kind of really hard work that you have to do. So, but I'm loving it. It's like, that's the way to go, really, right? So what is the third step, Tom?
The third step is alchemy. And alchemy, you might know this, it's kind of an ancient word that comes from, this sort of medieval practice of trying to turn lead into gold. Newsflash, it doesn't work. You can't turn lead into gold. However, we took that idea of the desire for transformation and tried to apply it to our concept of alchemy, because as we've been talking about, there are real barriers, whether it be the veteran or the warrior that gets injured in battle and suddenly he no longer has this purpose, he no longer has this calling to serve, or whether it be our society right now, where COVID hit us in March and we all needed to pivot. We all needed to figure out ways that we could make it for both ourselves and our loved ones, right? And alchemy is this notion of really sort of taking this life experience, whatever it may be, whatever adversity strikes us, and approaching it with hope and optimism. And, one of the things that I like to think of when I think of alchemy is the Japanese art form of kintsugi. Kintsugi is that art form where a broken pot can be not only mended back together, but it can be mended with gold. We're not going to hide our cracks. We're not going to be embarrassed about them. In fact, we are going to illuminate them and treat them as precious scars that we should value. So Dave was kind enough to find this beautiful kintsugi bowl and sent it to me right in the midst of COVID, right in the midst of when we were actually finishing this book. And I think about every day about what are those cracks in my life, and how instead of the former Tom would try to probably bury them in the past and hope no one ever knows about them, right? But I think that when I embrace alchemy, I let people in. I embrace the barriers that I have in my life. I share them with others, not only so I can grow from them, but so that others can as well. So that is, in a nutshell, the concept of alchemy. And in the book, we actually share not just the story of J.R. Martinez, one of our ambassadors who was critically burned in the war, but went on to just a triumphant acting career and speaking career and champion of Dancing in the Stars. But we also talk about the story of an entrepreneur in Chicago who owned a bakery, who is really crushed and devastated by COVID, but found a calling and a creative way to move forward.
Wow, I love this one.
This is one of the tough. This is pretty tough.
Well, this is super tough, but I feel relaxed when, I don't know, for some reason, when I think of alchemy, it's like, okay, this is the way you can really bring everything together. So at some point it's hard, but at some point it's like being in peace, being at peace, actually taking in everything that you're feeling. I really
love that mentality, because I think one of the things, as we've studied people from all over the world who face incredible adversity, you do find this sense of peace with it. When you're talking to these individuals, and from the outside looking in, you think, how could this person who from the outside looking in has experienced incredible difficulty in their lives, and yet there's a centeredness and there's a peace? And it's because they've exercised what J.R. Martinez in the book calls that muscle of alchemy, which takes practice. And you've got to come at those challenges that you face with hope and optimism and knowing you can get through. And then as you go on to the next life element, Luis, which is pioneer. So you've got this vision, you maybe are stretching your comfort zone. You've got to take, you're starting, going back to Mandy's journey, she's singing, she's goes from the first coffee shop to bigger and bigger, and eventually America's Got Talent. Well, what we find is that somewhere along that journey, you're going to hit some roadblock that seems insurmountable. Most of us have that story of, I had this vision, I'm going along, and I hit the insurmountable roadblock. And so this is where pioneer is a big thing. Pioneer comes from the innovation. How do you innovate through your adversity? How do you come up with new and creative solutions? One of the innovators featured in here at the start of this chapter is Hugh Hurd, who is the head of the biomechatronics lab at MIT, which makes some of the most advanced prosthetics in the world. And Hugh, he suffered when he was young, a terrible injury, got frostbite on his legs while climbing, and had to have a double amputation. Now, when Hugh looked down at where his legs used to be and saw that they were there no more, he started bawling. He thought, my life can never be what it was. I was going to be a world-class climber. Well, in that moment of trauma, he was devastated. But over time, as he developed his own vision, what evolved from it is that he pioneered some of the most advanced prosthetics in the world to help him climb better than ever before. He tells this story about this one route that nobody could climb. And he couldn't climb it when he didn't have legs. And so he went back to that route. When he had legs, I'm sorry, he couldn't climb it. When he didn't have legs, he goes back to that route. He puts on his prosthetics and he flashes it. He gets up the route. This is a route nobody could get up. And when asked, Hugh, how did you do it? He said, well, it really wasn't that difficult because there's this reach up there that was a foot further than anybody could reach. So I just made my legs a foot longer and I got up. And so pioneer is this sort of spirit of approaching that big adversity that seems insurmountable with a spirit of energy and excitement and saying, there must be a way through it. And we give some principles in the book from some of the best pioneers in the world using design thinking. How do you innovate even in the midst of the challenge you're facing? Where is there opportunity? Who do you go to help come up with those innovations? And so pioneer is a big part of when you hit the roadblock, what's a creative way through it?
I love it. I love it. And I feel that, I mean, we are still missing 3, but just getting to this one, you can have a big sense of accomplishment in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm guessing what is next, because you cannot keep it just for yourself, right? What is it, Tom? What is next?
Well, the next one is one that we started our conversation with. The next element is rope team. And rope team is just one of the, in my mind, it's one of the most obvious elements, but it's one of the elements that we don't talk about enough. In the world that we live in today, we probably all have some sort of social media
following
that we log into on a daily basis. We send likes, we get likes, we have friends, we have connections. Right now, we're probably broadcasting across all of these social media outlets. And in this world of digital connections, it's sometimes difficult to understand what are our trusted connections. Who are those people that will love us even if our Instagram-worthy photo is not that Instagram-worthy in life, right? Who are those people that will be by our side when we are not having our best day, right? And I think that part of Rope Team is building those trusted friendships and bonds that will allow us not just to achieve our vision, right? But who are those trusted friends that we know will be there to help us through all of the barriers in our lives, right? Because we all need that, and we're all going through something. And this chapter looks at, not just the practice of developing your rope team, but it tells the stories. In addition to the story of Dave and I that we tell in this chapter, we also tell the story about Gretchen Evans, who is one of the highest ranked military generals that suffered a devastating accident while serving in Afghanistan. And all of her stories of both building connection with the person that turned out to be her husband throughout the ordeal, and how she turned to other people and ultimately allowed her vulnerability to shine through and was embraced by others. I think that one of the most powerful things about this chapter is we tap into the grandest of all grand philosophers, Aristotle, and make some of the words that he wrote relevant again. For a philosopher that spent so much time writing about ethics and physics and God knows how many subjects, he also spent a lot of time on friendship. And one of the most compelling things that I thought that he wrote was, life is not worth living without friends. He recognized how important that social bond was to survival, that he put down that life is not worth living without friends. And as recently as within the past decade, Google launched a project called, which we cover in the book, called Project Aristotle, tapping into his wisdom there. And they said, how is it that we can create the best performing teams? And they came up with a wide list of factors, some of which you might expect, like, is this team one that allows me to have the right talents around me? Is this team the one that allows us to have an impact? So it had identified all these key things, but then there was one unexpected characteristic that came out of that study. And that unexpected characteristic was something that Google termed psychological safety. We've all been in those meetings where we have an idea, but we're nervous about how it will be embraced by our colleagues. We've all been in those moments where we don't want to feel any shame for revealing that thought that's deep inside of us. Well, Google found that high-performing teams have such a high level of psychological safety that people are totally comfortable to be themselves, to share their feelings, to bring their full self to the table. And I think during COVID times, we need this more than ever. We need to create psychological safety, not only in our work teams, but also in our families, in our friendships, in our churches, any type of group bonds and group experiences that we have. We need to bring people together and let them know that they have friends with us who care about us on our good days and our bad. And that this rope team element is truly about building that sense of collaboration and trust between people so that we can move forward toward our vision and get through all of those dark days that we all experience.
Wow, it's so powerful. It's amazing. I mean, imagine a rope team, humanity's rope team, going through all these COVID and post-COVID traumatic economic situation that we are going to go through. And actually, this is very much linked, bringing a bit of happiness research here, to the longest study done ever by Harvard, more than 75 years study, tracking same people, but some people died. Actually, the director of the study changed multiple times because they've been tracking and they keep tracking more than 75 years. And the main conclusion is relationships is the key.
Yeah.
Is the key. Well, but what I love about rope is that it goes beyond relationships, because it goes into creating that psychological safety or secure base that actually you use when you are climbing. So one of the quotes that I love is that we either summit together or we die together. It is so powerful. And this is something that it requires a lot of commitment. So this is fantastic. We are running this, as you know, this online summit in a couple of months, focus on loneliness and focusing on belonging. And I feel this rope concept can be the core of many.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Luis, going back to this idea of like, how do people face the biggest challenges in their lives? How do you face something like COVID? What is very common is to hole up in your own space and not reach out to others and to suffer on your own, right? And so, as you know, from the loneliness research and the mental health research, a lot of what people are doing in COVID is that, right? Like they are They're holding up because it's very common to be like ashamed of the uncertainty, ashamed of your fear, feeling like only you are feeling this, or I'm embarrassed to share it with someone else. But what we know from our own research, as well as the research of many others, is the most important thing to do is to reach out and build your rope team, and to trust that others will embrace you. And for some of the people we work with, they'll say, well, but I don't have that rope team. Where do I go find it? And that's hard, right? Like if you don't have it right now, if you don't have that supportive family and supportive friends, but what we tell our folks is know that there are people out there that are like you, that are suffering like you, who have learned from these things, who want to be your rope team. And we can help you get started finding it, but don't hole up just into yourself. Realizing that others can help you in this journey is so important, and they can help you. We talk also about different rope teams. There may be your rope team that's going to help you pioneer. If I'm not feeling happy and I need to channel my inner happiness, Luis might be on my happiness rope team. If I am suffering and need to be my alchemy, person, I'm going to go to JR. So you have these different rope teams that you kind of build around certain needs in your life. And then one of the next steps in the journey, because we're going on to step 6 and then step 7. Step 6 is an important thing that we came to realize not early on, but a few years down the line in the organization. We realized that if you've got your vision and you're constantly striving towards this new stretching of the comfort zone, and you're doing all these things that we've described, oftentimes you forget to pause and reflect back on your journey. And so this is what we call summits. It comes from the idea of hiking in the mountains, and you look out on a beautiful vista, and there are summits as far as the eye can see. And it is a reminder that if you only think of your life as a series of that next summit, oh, there's that one over there, there's that one over there, and all you're doing is pursuing those next summits, you're going to miss a vital element of just pausing and reflecting and being grateful for the journey so far. And so summits is this powerful act of pausing and reflecting on the journey that you have come from, and being grateful for the gifts that you have received. We talk about one of our No Barriers ambassadors, Kyle Maynard, who's a 2-time ESPY award-winning athlete. He was born without arms and legs, stubs of arms and legs, and became this extraordinary athlete. He climbed to the top of many Kilimanjaro. He was in Aconcagua, some of the biggest peaks in the world. And when you ask him, reflect on these incredible accomplishments, he exudes gratitude. He realizes that none of this would have been possible without others, without the support he received. He realizes he acknowledges sort of the work he has put into it, the work his team has put into it. And so I think it's really important for us to accept that life shouldn't just be a continual, perpetual series of summits. You need to pause, reflect, look back, and be grateful for the gifts you've learned through the struggle.
It's so powerful. I'm feeling that I'm sensing a lot of love, forgiveness, and gratitude in this journey.
Yes.
I think that when we get to these summits, I feel that this is about, okay, this is about saying thank you, right? So how do we get to the last step? Because I'm still missing one, but I'm sure it's this one. So what is the last step, Tom? This is about sharing, right?
Yeah, this is the last step, and the one that I think is so critical to our work. And if I had to say that if I had to say that our fingerprints are the No Barriers fingerprint is on one of these elements, it is on elevate, because that is what our organization is all about. Our final element is elevate, and elevate is all about positively impacting the world as a leader who serves others. There's a great Gandhi quote that is, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And when I think about that quote, and I think about what we're trying to do with the life element of Elevate, is shift the lens with which how we look at not just the world, but our impact on the world. Shift the lens from one that is focused on, I am trying to get from here to here, to one in which we say, we are trying to get to here. While the book is entitled What's Within You, by the end of the book, by the end of this final chapter, I think everyone will understand that the real meaning is what's within us. We can only do so much alone, and our vision should be one that lifts others up. And we profile in this book, or in this chapter, people that have sort of gone through the struggle of themselves and figured out, hey, there are things that I'm struggling with, but ultimately realized that part of their vision, part of their journey toward happiness or ultimate fulfillment is in lifting up others. And it's hard to make that shift, because I think that when we're in the midst of our struggle, it is all about, how do I end my own suffering? How do I get through this? And that's natural. But oftentimes there's this moment in which we, when we talk to people that are in the midst of it, that they know that there is something more for them to give, that there is this gift that they need to share. It's not a matter of they want to share it. They know that deep in their bones, they have to serve others, that their path to fulfillment, their vision is ultimately going to be gained through lifting others up. And so in this chapter, we talk about Whitney Way Thor, who is the no body shame activist, and about her struggles with both shame of her body weight and her journey to put herself out there to the world, and realize that she had an enormous gift that she could give to the world by not just sharing where she was on her journey, but chronicling it for the world to see that she is happy as a body positive activist and as a dancer. And she could give so many other people that gift of loving themselves and lifting them up if she allowed her life to be shared in a television show. So that is one person that we chronicle in the book. But, another person that, when we've talked a lot about COVID times, is a doctor in Detroit, Dr. Rena Audish. And one of the things that she is focused on is patient care and the compassion that she gives the patients. And so she walked us through all the different steps that she takes in her hospital to make sure that she can elevate her patients and allow them to experience not just care, but really to find love and life during a traumatic time period. So I think that that'll be an especially relevant story for those that are thinking about how this virus has affected all of us.
So powerful. Now that I see all the elements, imagine that we design education systems when we actually start with Elevate. Because this is the end game, right?
Yes.
But it's not easy. It's not easy because then you are basically prescribing too much. But at some point in the world we are living today, probably we should be prescribing a bit more, basically bringing this vision and bringing this wisdom. Because when you read most of the masters, they all end with what's within us. So at some point, maybe a call to action to the educators and education system, why don't we start with within us? Mm-hmm. And then we go into within myself. But knowing that whatever is going to be in me is going to be in us at some point. I don't know, what do you think? It's too crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that
I love this idea, tied to the release of the book. We actually have a whole series of curriculum for schools and students. Tom actually got a note yesterday when we released the book, and it started hitting up the bestseller list of a teacher who wanted to bring the book and our resources to the classroom. I think you're right, Luis. Like, one, how do we teach this at a foundational age, at the start of, as kids are learning, they need to learn these principles. And how do we let people know that Elevate is this part of the magic sauce of what is going to make you fulfilled in life? And if more people believe that, how much better will the world be? Because it's about others,
Yes. Well, we have a couple of minutes left. So one last question for you, Tom, and one for you, David, and we wrap up. How do you feel now? I mean, I think that do you feel that you are now at the elevate stage of your life, or you are going through the elements? Where are you now, Tom? Same question for you, David. Okay.
It's a great question, Luis. And I feel that I am in a constant flow of examining the elements and what their interplay is with my life. And I continually find myself going through each one of those elements and finding new things that I haven't yet discovered. So while a book has been written, and while I have studied this at length, there are constantly new discoveries that I am finding in myself that relate to words or stories that come from the book. So what I would say is I have more clarity than I've had before, but still in constant evolution, still in the midst of the struggle, but feeling that sense of clarity that I can, in fact, get through whatever obstacle is there, that I can, in fact, find my way back to my vision when I get lost or thrown off course. But yes, I'm right there in the middle of it. And I'm just so proud that I get to share this gift with other people, because it is a gift. And No Barriers gave me this gift in all the trust that they put in us. And now it's great to be able to share that to other people.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say I have elements of what Tom just talked about, but for our listeners who are like, God, these guys are super optimistic and happy. And I would say that COVID has been really tough on me personally and on No Barriers. 80% of what No Barriers used to do was in-person life-changing experiences. Typically from April to October, we would be weekly serving hundreds and then totals thousands of people in person. Every day I would get a note from someone in one of those programs that we changed their life. COVID hits, we can't do any of that. We had to lay off a bunch of really talented people. And I would say it was tough, right? And it's still tough, but what I would say is that it was a good example of what Tom's talking about, which is, okay, well, we teach about this stuff. We teach about these tough moments. And where do you go when you're laying off a whole bunch of people and all of the programs that No Barriers usually does at this time, you can no longer do? Well, you go back to that card in my wallet. That's the vision card, right? That's the vision I made before COVID hit. And I looked at it and I said, that's all the things on here are still possible. This is not getting too wrapped up in what I thought life was and the excitement that we had, and saying, I got to go back to that foundation of why we exist and the opportunity we have to change lives. And so for me, there's been tough times in these past 6 months, really tough times that have made me question, what is my purpose? Why are we here? But the minute we recognize, hey, this is an opportunity to reach millions of people instead of tens of thousands. And then we hosted our first ever virtual summit at the end of June and had over 1 million views. We launched the book yesterday and it's already a bestseller. You got to say to yourself, wow, this is a perfect example of alchemy and optimism and hope in the midst of great adversity. Terrible things have happened and will continue to happen, but there's really a way to help lift up others. And so I think in my dark moments, I still am in that space of sort of lamenting what was lost, which a lot of our people go through. And in my bright moments where I'm tapped into that light, I think, like, when I woke up this morning thinking about this podcast, I thought, this is incredible, an opportunity to talk to thousands of people and to give them the roadmap, so that they can get started. That's powerful. So I think I've been on a bit of that journey that I hope some of your listeners resonate with, of the bad and the good and the ugly all wrapped up in the past 6 months.
It's amazing. Actually, there is a comment from Viva in India. And actually she's saying that this is wonderful, Tom. When you were talking about alchemy, it is about being vulnerable and accept cracks with grace and not to feel a victim. That this is very much, this is a summary of this conversation in many ways, right? Yeah. The way that we end this amazing, feel enlightened conversation, where do we get the book? Where is it? I guess it's Amazon, right? But how do we access?
Well, it's available on Amazon, and you could get it in hardcover, softcover, and we will have an audio version of the book available to you. If there's any,
and there's an ebook as well.
Yeah, there's an ebook as well. And if any of the listeners out there are in areas where Amazon is not reaching them, they certainly can send an email to No Barriers. We will find a way to get you a book, and we will find a way to make sure that it gets to whatever communities on this planet that we need to reach.
And you can also go to nobarriersusa.org to both, get the link to the book, but also look at some of our courses. We have a lot of virtual offerings to teach these principles. One of the best ways to actually learn it is to go through our 30-day course with us and to really start applying it. And then you're going to start to see some of that magic. A lot of research suggests that 30 days is sort of like a magical amount of time. If you've done it for 30 days, you'll have developed a new habit and you'll start living it. And so we encourage you to join us there as well.
So let's do it. Let's go on the journey to a life with no barriers. This is so powerful. Thank you so much, Tom, David. It went through so fast, but I feel you gave a lot already about who you are and what this path is about. And it's definitely a path worth walking. So thank you again, Tom and Dave, and thank you everybody for joining. The video will be, it is available and will be available in case you want to go back. And I invite you to really go through the book and go through the training as well. So thank you so much and take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Luis.